Well, surprise, surprise. The Manchester bomber Salman Abedi apparently wasn't the only member of his family to harbor extremist views, as Libyan officials arrested the suicide bomber's father and two brothers and uncovered what investigators called a plot for a new attack. This is according to Fox News a little bit earlier today. Hashim Abedi, brother of the Manchester suicide bomber, was arrested earlier today. He was born in 1997, was arrested in Tripoli today, Wednesday evening by the Libyan counterterrorism force RADA on suspicion of links to the Islamic State, and was planning a new attack on the Libyan capital, a government spokesman told Reuters on Wednesday. The father of the bomber was arrested in Tripoli on Wednesday. A Libyan security spokesman told the Associated Press the father, Ramadan Abedi, had said another brother of the bomber, Ismail, was arrested Tuesday. What's more, two U.S. defense officials confirmed to Fox News that Salman Abedi spent 3 weeks in Libya prior to the Manchester bombing, returning to England just days before the Grande concert Monday, when he launched his attack on the concert venue. Shocker. Most of the time, yes. You know, it's kind of funny. Most of the time when we hear these so-called lone wolf attackers, they usually have some connection to the Middle East, or their family has some kind of connection to some kind of radical group in the Middle East.
Well, it just stands to reason there were more than one person involved because of the bomb, the way it was constructed, and it took some doing. Some strategic planning had to be involved.
Yeah, and Britain has a problem because apparently a lot of people do this, where they travel to places like Libya and then come back. They're afraid that there are a lot of radicals within the midst of the UK. And by the way, they think maybe somebody else made the bomb, and that bomb maker might still be on the loose. So that's good. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We're doing the show till 10 p.m. tonight, 8 to 10 p.m. Make sure if you miss any of the show, though, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. In the first hour of the show today, I'm going to talk about this attack, the latest with this attack, the latest news, which I just updated you on. And I'm also going to get into the details of what ISIS really wants. We don't really talk about this enough. I've talked a lot about on the show how we're fighting a radical ideology that is spreading throughout the world, and it's an ideological battle, a war of ideas. And by the way, I'm hearing more and more people say that now. It's a war of ideas. I've been saying it for years, but more and more people are saying that, which is good, but I think they listen to the show. I'm just saying. And so we're going to talk about that. Alan Dershowitz actually has a really good piece as well. He was one of my voices of reason yesterday. He says terrorism persists because it works. So we're going to talk about that. In the second hour, the CBO just came out with a new report on the replacement of Obamacare, and the Democrats are not happy, of course. The sky is falling, and they want single-payer health care. Obviously, they want more government health care. That's what they think the solution is. We're going to go over to that, and when I have some voices of reason on that as well. So you want to stick with me all 2 hours. We're going to get into this latest report on NSA spying. Apparently, it was done a lot during the Obama administration, and it's a big problem, which is another alarm bell I have been sounding on this show for a while now. So you want to stay tuned all 2 hours. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson producing tonight. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well, and I'm wondering, what does ISIS want? Do you think they got coexist bumper stickers on their
yes.
On their Humvees?
Yeah. The coexist bumper stickers. They just want an internet connection, a decent paying job. That's what they really want. A smartphone,
free internet too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to do about a radical interpretation of Islam or anything. Exactly right. If you have any comments, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. Make sure to send me a friend request on Facebook as well. I made it to 1,000 friends on Facebook today, which is pretty good because I usually don't have any friends, but I made it to 1,000.
You were going to have a birthday party next year? I'll tell you.
Exactly right. And so you can send me a friend request. I will accept it. Or you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. We are on Facebook Live there as well. There's more in dealing with this terrorist in Manchester. Fox News reported earlier today the man British police say blew himself up is believed to have traveled to Syria and had proven links with the Islamic State terror network. British and French intelligence have information that Abedi had been to Syria, although it was unclear if he was part of a larger network of attackers. We just found out about his family having connections, so we know now that he did. And that was according to the French Interior Minister. That minister spoke with Prime Minister Theresa May and said the two countries should continue cooperating closely on counterterrorism efforts despite Britain's pending exit from the European Union. It was also reported the attacker had recently returned to the UK from Libya days before the attack, according to his friends. So we're finding out that, of course, he had connections to ISIS. Of course, he was not a lone wolf. Of course, his family had connections to the Middle East. You know, I think in the United States, it was Ted Cruz who proposed the idea that if American citizens, for instance, go over to the Middle East and fight for ISIS or are proven to have worked with ISIS in some way, that we immediately renounce their citizenship and don't let them back in. I think that is a great idea. I think Europe should take heed on that as well. But I wanted to get into something a little bit different here because we've talked a lot about the fact that this is an ideological war. We've talked a lot about the fact that ISIS is spreading their propaganda. It's a cancer on the world. It's going beyond just people who live in the Middle East. It's beyond a war of civilizations. It's a war of ideas. But what are the ideas that we are actually fighting against? That is the real question. I wonder how many people really know or really understand what we're fighting against. You know, we hear vague things like, well, we're fighting against Islam. Well, that's a little vague. There are many different interpretations of Islam. Are we fighting against Sunnis, Shiites? Are we fighting against the Islamic mystics? Are we fighting against, there's a bunch of different interpretations of Islam. Are we fighting against countries? Are we fighting against states? Well, let's find out what ISIS really believes. What ISIS really wants. I found a really great piece in the Atlantic, of all places, believe it or not. And it talks about this. And what happened is they went and they talked to people who sympathize with the Islamic State or who are part of ISIS or who understand ISIS to try to get an idea of what ISIS really believes, what ISIS really wants. And what they found was very interesting. The piece is very, very long. Obviously, I can't read it all. But I just have some excerpts from it here. This is one of the things that caught my attention. He says, the reality is that the Islamic State is Islamic. Should be a duh moment. But, we couldn't say radical Islam forever. We couldn't say Islamist extremists forever. Forever under the Obama administration, we were so afraid to say that. But this guy is saying that they are Islamic. Just talk to them. He says, the reality is that the Islamic State is Islamic. They're very Islamic. Yes, it has attracted psychopaths and adventure seekers, drawn largely from the disaffected populations of the Middle East and Europe. But the religion is preached by most of its ardent followers and derives from coherent and even learned interpretations of Islam. We found that out about this attacker in Manchester. You were telling me that earlier, Tom Benson, that this guy was known for talking about the Quran, for talking about radical interpretations of the Quran. And people and neighbors, I heard, reported him to the police, reported him to the authorities because they were afraid what he was going to do. So this whole idea that they're just crazy, you know, I liked Trump's comments in a sense when he says they're losers, because what he was trying to do is degrade them, because according to their interpretation of Islam, they are heroes. They are martyrs. They are going to heaven for what they're doing. They're going to be given gifts by God for doing it. But he's calling them losers. But really, that's not far enough, because they're not just losers who are just doing radical things for the sake of it. They're doing it for a strict belief in their religion. So what else does that include? Well, the story continues. He says, virtually every major decision and law promulgated by the Islamic State adheres to what it calls in its press and pronouncement and on its billboards, license plates, stationery, and coins, the prophetic methodology, which means the following the prophecy and example of Muhammad in a lot of detail. Muslims can reject the Islamic State, nearly all do, but pretending that it isn't actually a religious millenarian group with theology that must be understood to be combated has already led the United States to underestimate it and back foolish schemes to counter it. Exactly what I've been saying for a long time. He says we'll need to get acquainted with the Islamic State's intellectual genealogy if we are to react in the way that will not strengthen it, but instead help to self-immolate in its own excessive zeal. Once again, it's their radical interpretation of Islam, and that radical interpretation of Islam is strict adherence to the Prophet. That means there's no room for interpretation. You know, the Quran is very interesting, because the Quran is not written by like the Bible. The Bible's written mostly, there are different sections of the Bible. You have the creation section. Most of it's written like a narrative where you're reading a historical account. Then you have the Levitical law, which goes over the actual laws given to God by Moses. Then you have the prophets that are warning the people about the doom coming in the future if they don't get back with God. And then once you go to the New Testament, you have actual accounts and letters from the apostles. The Quran isn't written like that. It's not written in chronological order, for one. It's written from the shortest verses to the longest verses. And most of it is just sayings of the prophet. So when you're just getting a whole bunch of sayings from the prophet, a lot of times interpretation, you can interpret things really radically without understanding its context. And that's what happens when they have a literal interpretation of everything the prophet says, and then they go to the Hadith, and then they go to Sharia law, and they think it should be interpreted literally even in today's world. That creates a lot of problems. And that's exactly what's happening. It says, centuries have passed, he continues on later in the article, since the wars of religion ceased in Europe and since men stopped dying in large numbers because of arcane theological disputes. Hence, perhaps the incredulity and denial with which Westerners have greeted news of the theology and practices of the Islamic State. Many refuse to believe that this group is as devout as it claims to be, or as backwards-looking or apocalyptic as its actions and statements suggest. It says their skepticism is comprehensible. In the past, Westerners who accused Muslims of blindly following ancient scriptures came to deserved grief from academics, yada, yada, yada. With the acknowledgement of these factors, no explanation of the rise of the Islamic State could be complete. But focusing on them to the exclusion of ideology reflects another kind of Western bias, that if religious ideology doesn't matter much in Washington or Berlin, surely it must be equally irrelevant in Raqqa or Mosul. This is not true. They're finding out that it's all based on this radical interpretation of Islam. Alan Dershowitz has a great piece on this, which I'm going to get to. I'm going to get to his comments. He was a voice of reason yesterday. He was a voice of reason today. What else do they believe? There was another piece from the USA Today, written a couple years ago, actually, that talks about this, about exactly what they want, what ISIS wants and what they believe. It says, because of differing beliefs on judgment, ISIS has reinstated Sharia law, which brings behavioral restrictions and consequences of your actions back to the ways of 8th century Islam. Sharia law, which cannot be changed, states that any opposition or criticism towards Muhammad, God, or the Quran is not allowed. A man is not allowed to marry a non-Muslim woman. Women cannot drive. 4 men are required to testify in court alongside a woman for a case of rape to be proved against a woman. And Muslims should actively engage in taqiyya, which is lying to non-Muslims to make Islam seem better. These laws and many other more gruesome laws cannot be broken in the current ISIS implementation of Sharia law. If they are broken, that person can be easily punished by a merciless death or amputations. The Sharia law is the reason why so many public executions, crucifixions, amputations, and other acts occur at the hands of ISIS. Why am I going over all of this? Why is it important to know what they believe? Because we have to fight what they believe. We can't just fight them militarily. We can't just try to ignore them. We can't just say, okay, well, we'll give them more money, give the area more money or something, or we'll stop U.S. interventionist policies, and that'll just solve all the problems. It won't solve all the problems because their ideology is strict. And part of their ideology as well is implementing a state, a caliphate. They want to implement that state across the world. And if you think they just want to implement it in the Middle East, you're mistaken. Because a lot of them are migrating to Europe, and they want to implement it in Europe as well. They want to spread it across the world as well. Just like Islam in the very beginning was spread in a big part by the sword. Muhammad was just as much a conqueror as he was a religious leader. They want to do the same thing now. And they're spreading it through an ideology which has to be combated with our ideology. We have to prove to the world that our ideology is better. But we're so afraid to do that, one, because of political correctness, and two, we're afraid of, upsetting our allies. We have to stop being afraid to do that. We have to demand more from our allies and stop supporting those regimes which support a radical ideology like this. Otherwise, we can't win this war. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Orlando Smart Talk Radio, Beyond Reason Radio. Hope you all are being informed from this show. We'll get to some entertaining stuff as well. We'll end the show today. You want to stay for the full 2 hours, and if you miss any of the show, just catch the podcast later and listen to the rest later like you have to. We'll end the show today with things that made Yaffee laughy. At the end of this hour, I actually want to talk about movies, because there's been some pretty bad box office bombs, and they think over the Memorial Day weekend it's going to be even worse. And this, I'm a big movie buff, so I want to talk about the problem with new movies and the movie industry in general. So we're going to go over that as well, a good lighter topic for us. But right now we've been talking about we've been talking about ISIS. We've been talking about the terrorist attack there. He had connections over to the Middle East. We've been talking about what ISIS really wants, which is they basically want us to go back to the 8th century. Al-Qaeda was radical as it gets at the time, but they wanted some modernization. ISIS doesn't want that. They want us to literally go back to the 8th century and have an 8th century type caliphate and the strictest interpretation of Sharia law in Islam you can get. And it's going to be up to good Muslims to reform that interpretation and to fight back against the bad. But it's also going to be up to us to spread the ideas that we believe in. If we believe in them anymore, that's the other problem. Do we even believe in them here anymore? So I found one of my voices of reason yesterday was Alan Dershowitz. He was on Fox and Friends yesterday morning. And I played this yesterday. I want to play it again. This is what he said.
You hear people try to be sympathetic to the terrorists, saying, oh, they grew up poor, they had no opportunity. That is total nonsense. A lot of these terrorists are well-educated, they're wealthy, they've had every opportunity, they've been welcomed to countries like Great Britain, educated, welcome to the United States. This is not about poverty. This is not about disenfranchisement. This is about a culture and an ideology that supports it from the very, very top down. And one of the worst offenders is the Palestinian Authority and Abbas, that has a statute, a law on its book, giving rewards to the families of terrorists. That has to stop.
Okay, and I think he's exactly right. One of the that's something that's perpetuated by the left a lot, that a lot of this is economic, a lot of this is American intervention, a lot of this, like he said, and this is someone who is not a Republican saying these things, not a conservative saying these things, saying that's a bunch of BS, basically. Because it is. And he's exactly right. And he has a piece that I found online today that talks a little bit more about this. And I think he's right in a lot of cases here. He says, terrorism persists because it works. He says, every time a horrendous terrorist attack victimizes innocent victims, we wring our hands and promise to increase security and take other necessary preventive measures. But we fail to recognize how our friends and allies play such an important role in encouraging, incentivizing, and inciting terrorism. It says, if we are to have any chance of reducing terrorism, we must get to its root cause. It's exactly what I've been saying. I'm telling these people, listen to my show. It's not poverty, disenfranchisement, despair, or any of the other abuse excuses offered to explain, if not justify, terrorism as an act of desperation. It is anything but. Many terrorists, such as those who participated in the 9/11 attacks, were well-educated, well-off, mobile, and even successful. They made a rational cost-benefit decision to murder innocent civilians for one simple reason. They believe that terrorism works. And tragically, they are right. Dershowitz continues on here, says, the international community has rewarded terrorism while punishing those who try to fight it by reasonable means. It all began with a decision by Yasser Arafat and other Palestinian terrorist groups to employ the tactic of terrorism as a primary means of bringing the Palestinian issue to the forefront of world concern. Based on the merits and demerits of the Palestinian cause, it does not deserve this stature. It says the Palestinian situation has been different. The hijacking of airplanes, the murders of Olympic athletes in Munich, the killing of Israeli children, and many other terrorist atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian terrorists has elevated their cause above all other causes in the human rights community. Although the Palestinians have not yet gotten a state because they twice rejected generous offers of statehood, their cause still dominates the United Nations and numerous human rights groups. Pretty interesting. He says other groups with grievances have learned from the success of the Palestinian terrorism and have emulated the use of that barbaric tactic. Even today, when the Palestinian Authority claims to reject terrorism, they reward the families of suicide bombers. His point is, using the Palestinian example and other examples, is that terrorism worked for them. They're getting more and more of what they want because they use terrorism. And because we continually cave into their demands, thinking it's somehow our fault. When it's not our fault. He said terrorists will continue as long as it continues to bear fruits. The fruits may be different for different causes. Sometimes it is simply publicity. Sometimes it's a recruitment tool. Sometimes it brings about concessions, as it did in many European countries. Some European countries that have now been plagued by terrorism even released captured Palestinian terrorists. He says England, France, Italy, and Germany were among the countries that released Palestinian terrorists in the hope of preventing terrorist attacks on their soil. Their selfish and immoral tactic backfired and only caused them to become even more inviting targets for the murderous terrorists. That's kind of interesting because we kind of did the same thing under Obama, releasing people from Guantanamo Bay, did we not? Thinking that, if we placate to them, they'll just like us more.
Appeasement doesn't
exactly
work.
Right. We're doing the same thing with Iran. We're thinking that it's going to work, and it doesn't. All that does is make the terrorists believe that terrorism works. Tough pill to swallow here, but I think he makes a lot of interesting points. If we continue to believe that, well, they're just oppressed people, and it's somehow our fault that they want to be terrorists, and if we just appease them, they'll like us more, they're just going to keep doing it because it works. I think he's right in a lot of situations. I didn't really connect it to the Palestinian thing until he had mentioned it, but he makes a good point. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We have a lot more to get to in the show today. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
So moving on a little bit from the terrorism topic, even though it's sort of related, there's a new report out by Circa News, and there was other reports coming out about this, about the NSA, National Security Agency, and their spying under President Obama. You know, it's interesting. I took my mom to the airport today, and I was in her car, and she has satellite radio, so you can listen to all the news channels on satellite radio. And I think I was listening to Fox Business or whatever. And there was Stuart Varney was talking to Judge Napolitano, and they were having this debate over the NSA spying. And Stuart Varney was saying, we must have it. In the age of terrorism, we have to have all this spying that's going on. We have to spy. He says, basically, I want them to spy on everybody. I want the government to spy on everyone. And Judge Napolitano came in and he said, well, what about the Fourth Amendment? Is this going too far? What about the Constitution? Basically saying there's too much information that they can't weed all through it. And that's why terrorist attacks like what happened in Britain happened, because the spying really doesn't work. And that seems to be where the debate is a lot, in today's world. There's a lot of people, and this is a debate in conservative circles. It's not just, liberal conservative here. In fact, I think many liberals will agree with me on this, that there is too much spying, in my opinion. But the report by Circa News details how the National Security Agency under former President Barack Obama routinely spied on Americans, violating their privacy protections and the agency's own database safeguards. According to a classified internal report reviewed by Circa, more than 5% of searches seeking upstream internet data on Americans inside the NSA's so-called Section 702 database violated the safeguards Obama and his intelligence chiefs vowed to follow in 2011. The newly disclosed violations have caught the attention of the ACLU, which is now questioning whether the U.S. intelligence community has the ability to police itself. There's other reports out there as well that there's lawsuits that detail that this was happening. Obviously, Edward Snowden and his revelations detailed that this was happening. And then we have what's going on with, Spygate in terms of their surveillance on Trump administration and what was going on there. And see, here's the thing. Here's my problem with all this spying. There's the accusations that Obama was doing this for political reasons. I think there's a lot of evidence that maybe he was. But even if he wasn't, the fact is it's so easy now for a leader to do it for political reasons because there's just so much going on out there. I mean, we talk about, I played audio a few weeks ago of Dennis Kucinich, who said one of his phone calls with a diplomat was spied on. They have the surveillance of Michael Flynn. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what started a lot of this Russia collusion madness, was the whole thing with Michael Flynn. All this spying, it's easy to create a narrative of either Trump's in collusion with Russia or Obama was spying on Trump. Even if neither of those things are true, it's so easy to create the narrative because there's so much spying going on. But my going back to this is the debate I hear is that we need the spying for national security reasons, that we need the spying to stop terrorism, right? In the age of nuclear terrorism, the threat of nuclear terrorism. But then I started thinking, a lot of the spying I'm hearing about, what is Michael Flynn talking to a Russian diplomat have to do with terrorism? What does it have to do with terrorism? Or Dennis Kucinich talking to another foreign leader. What does that have to do with terrorism? Or us spying on Angela Merkel of Germany? What does that have to do with terrorism? See, the point is, we've justified all of this in the beginning, saying, well, we have to do it for terrorism. We have to do it for terrorism. But then it seems like, to me anyway, this is going way beyond just spying and surveillance for terror. And the fact is, even if it's not happening now, it's not that too far of a jump for the government to use it for political purposes, or to use it for blackmail purposes, or to use it against American citizens. The infrastructure is there. Edward Snowden talked about this in his original interview. He said it's turnkey tyranny. He says the infrastructure there is all it takes is the one leader to come in and to use it for those bad purposes, and it's turnkey tyranny. And I'm thinking, people are wondering, is the spying used for political reasons, and is it used for good reasons? And I'm thinking maybe there's just too much spying in general. And to me, that's a big problem, especially when it was all justified for quote-unquote national security purposes, and it seems like it's going well beyond that. Does anybody agree with me on that? Am I going too far? 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. One of the people who has been sounding the alarm on this is Senator Rand Paul. And he was on Fox and Friends this morning, and he was talking about this. And, give Rand Paul credit. If you don't like a lot of his policies, at least he's pretty consistent. And he has been very consistent on this. And he talked about how this is such a problem. And I think, he was a voice of reason on this. So go ahead and play cut one for me, Tom Benson, of Rand Paul.
Yeah, see, I've been concerned about this for a long time and realize this is not just a few people. You think it's only people that are calling a foreign leader or a foreign person that are being picked up? If you mention a foreign person in your conversation or in your email, so if anybody mentions the name Assad in an email, it's being gathered up. And so it isn't just communications with Assad, it's communications about Assad. So we're talking about millions and millions of phone calls and emails that are being gathered up and then being searched with no sort of control over the privacy of the American. Sure. We call this a backdoor way to sort of get at Americans' privacy without using a warrant, and I think it's a terrible program.
So I might be in trouble, Tom Benson, because I Googled today the basic beliefs of ISIS. Oh. Because I wanted to do that segment at the beginning of the show.
Well, that means somebody's probably taping your conversation tonight.
Yeah, I hope you're enjoying the show, NSA.
Might be your...
If you want to share that with your other NSA buddies, maybe go ahead and do that, make it more popular. But I was thinking about, there's a lot of people that do stuff like that just for research purposes, and this is all being collected. And it's American citizens, and it's done without a warrant. And to me, that's a big problem. And even if it's not happening now, the libs believe that the whole Obama spying on Trump administration they think it's fake news or whatever. I don't think it is, but let's say it is. The fact is, do you still want the Republicans, you want the other side to have that power too, and to be able to use it against you? I think this is something where both sides could really agree on all this. Rand Paul continued on with this conversation. Here's play cut 2 for me, Tom Benson.
Yeah, and realize it's not the old-fashioned wiretap where they've tapped your phone. There's a huge cable going transatlantic, or there's a way station where they're being transmitted by satellite. Everything's being sucked up. So if you can imagine millions of things going through the internet across the sea or across the continent to another continent, millions and millions of internet transmissions all being soaked up based on a keyword. So Americans get caught up in that, and I would say 99.9% of Americans are innocent. I'm all for going after people, even Americans, if you have evidence and you present it to a judge, but we shouldn't suck up everybody's phone calls and everybody's internet transmission. And the danger is, and one of the accusations of Susan Rice and others, is that they were looking at this information politically, searching opponents and going after people in the Trump transition to try to bring them down.
He's exactly right. That's the problem. The accusation, and even if the accusation isn't true, it's easy to throw out all these accusations because there's so much spying going on. And it's troubling to me, the narratives that can be created from all of this.
And it's exactly going on right now with Trump.
Well, elaborate on that. What do you mean?
Well, they're making all these accusations, and there's no proof.
Exactly right, but they have all this spying, and they're saying their spying is justified for all these reasons, but they have no proof.
So the means justifies the end.
Exactly right. Well, the ends justify the means, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly right. I mean, am I the only one who thinks this is a bigger problem than it is? I mean, I can imagine being a senator, for instance, and really trying to talk with foreign diplomats. You're part of a senator of a special committee, and you have to talk with foreign diplomats. If I'm a foreign diplomat, I don't want to talk to that senator because I know now that our conversation is going to be spied on. Mm-hmm. And then it could be leaked, and it could be used for blackmail, or it could be used for a whole bunch of different political or nefarious reasons. How is a senator or someone in the State Department or anyone going to be able to have an honest conversation about this stuff over the phone when you know that all this surveillance is going on? And we know what's going on now. It's absolute proof that it's going on now beyond what's being revealed of the NSA. The whole Russia thing is based on that. Is it not? And my big question at the end of the day is, what does any of this have to do with terrorism? Nothing. And this is what happened. It's just like with any government program. It starts out with good means, but then unintended consequences, and it grows way beyond the means. And once again, the government has too much power. This is why the founders put in stuff like the Fourth Amendment. This is why the founders put in protections against government overreach, because they knew this stuff was possible. And they wanted to limit the government's power. But then we had people like Stuart Varney on Fox Business saying, well, we have to do this because security, security, security. Well, I hope you understand the ramifications and the unintended consequences of that. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. In the next segment, we're going to go to the movies. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Welcome back to the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason, here live on News Radio 102.5 WFLA until 10 p.m. tonight. But if you miss any of the show, no worries. Just catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, or you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Search Michael Yaffee. I'll accept it. Or like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, and we are on Facebook Live there as well. So I think it's time to go to the movies.
Sitting in the darkness, what a world to see. Let's go to the movies and wait and see.
Yes. You know, I'm actually a big movie buff. I love the movies. But Hollywood's facing some problems this year. And there was an article on showbiz411.com that talked about this. They are worried about Memorial Day weekend box office numbers because the couple big movies that are coming out are not getting very good ratings, not get reviews. And I watched a couple of reviews beyond what this says.
Can you name a couple of the big movies? I mean, that used to be one of the things you look forward to during the summer months. Blockbuster movies. And I haven't heard much talk about any movies so far.
Yes. The two big movies that are supposed to come out Memorial Day weekend, Pirates 5, Pirates of the Caribbean, the fifth one.
The fifth one. What does that tell you?
Exactly right. And Baywatch. And according to reviews, they're both pretty awful.
Yeah.
It says Paramount's Baywatch with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and Zac Efron is a disaster, currently at 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. Wow. Pirates of the Caribbean has a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. We had a couple other box office bombs. We had the King Arthur movie that cost like over $100 million to make. Totally bombed. The new Alien movie, Alien Covenant. It did okay, But compared to what it cost to make and what they expected, it was pretty much a bomb. The rare exception this year was Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And I started thinking about this, and, there's so many different reasons why movies are bombing, I think. But the biggest thing that I always go back to is that movies are too expensive.
Amen.
They're too expensive. And if you're going to make these B-type, these half-good type movies, people are not going to pay $13 to see a movie that had 9% on Rotten Tomatoes.
You take 4 people, multiply that by 4, and then
Exactly.
you get popcorn or a soda or whatever. I mean, that adds up to $60 just like that.
There's a movie theater right across from my house here in Orlando, in Altamont. To go to a movie, in the evening, it's over $12.
Yeah.
That doesn't include drinks or popcorn and icing or anything. I don't want to pay. I was willing to pay that much because I wanted to see the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And Hollywood should learn that. Well, I was going to say Hollywood should learn that Chris Pratt is a winner, but even one of his movies, Passengers, that bombed. And that cost a ton of money to make. And what Hollywood really needs, there's so many things in there. First, movies are just too expensive. So you better make a really good movie if you're going to get people to go. Second, quit with all of the sequels and the remakes and the reboots. They're coming out with a new Spider-Man movie, which actually looks pretty good because Marvel Studios is doing it. But that's the third installment of Spider-Man in my lifetime. The third. That's just crazy. But Pirates 5? Yes, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was a sequel, but it was number 2. And the Guardians thing, even though it's based off a comic book, it's new. It's interesting. It's a different thing. Pirates 5? 5? What can you do after 4?
And the plots get so bizarre.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the second thing. So many in Hollywood have just forgotten what it takes to make a good movie. They believe everything can be done with action or special effects. And there's more to it than that. You have to have a good story, and it has to be directed well. And it has to be directed in a way that makes you want to watch it, and not this crazy shaky cam that's in like every movie now, or this crazy editing where you can't even figure out what's going on, like some of the Transformer movies or Michael Bay movies. But the stories are awful. Like Batman and Batman vs. Superman, that was supposed to be the big thing last year. It did terrible. Why? Because the story was not good. It was way too much in one movie. It was a weird story that wasn't believable. You look at what was the successful comic book movie, Christopher Nolan, one of the best directors in Hollywood right now, Christopher Nolan. But he focused on the story and made it relate to our times, but he wanted to make a really good movie with a really good story. And then he said, after 3, I'm done. We did 3. That's enough. I'm done. Not only that, but it was good acting. But then you look at this King Arthur movie and you're like, what has happened? This doesn't even look like a good movie. It doesn't even seem like King Arthur. It's just kind of silly. They think big names will sell it. That doesn't work anymore. They think special effects will sell it. That doesn't work anymore. And they think the name, because it's a sequel, will sell it. That doesn't work anymore either. How about just make a good story? Is that so hard to do? A good story that's directed well and has good actors actually acting, putting everything into it? I don't know. But the biggest problem is movies are too expensive. A movie's going to have to be really, really good for me to pay $13 to go see it. You better make a really good movie. So we'll see what happens, but Hollywood's in some trouble. And plus the liberal agenda and a lot of this stuff is definitely part of it as well. The first hour is up. Next hour, we have to go over the CBO report on the Obamacare replacement, healthcare. We're going to talk about that and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. Stay tuned for the second hour. I'll be right back. According to TheHill.com, Republicans pledged their health care bill would protect those with pre-existing conditions. The Congressional Budget Office disagrees. In its report Wednesday, the CBO warned that a new provision in the GOP healthcare bill would lead people with pre-existing conditions being charged much more for coverage. This directly contrasts a promise from House Republicans. Those with pre-existing conditions would still be able to afford health insurance. Well, this is obviously a very biased article, but let's continue on. According to the CBO reports, the Republican healthcare bill would result in 23 million fewer people with insurance over a decade, steep premium increases for older people, and price hikes for many people with pre-existing conditions. Now, there were some other things in the healthcare bill that says the bright spot is the CBO found that the bill would reduce the deficit by $119 billion over 10 years. That's less than the last bill, but it still reduces the deficit. And they do say that overall premiums will go down after the first couple of years. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 10 p.m. tonight. We were on from 8 p.m. If you missed any of the first hour of the show, we talked a lot about terrorism, ISIS, the Manchester attack, and much more. You can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available after the show, or you can send me a friend request on Facebook, and I will accept it, or go like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, and the video from the first hour is already up. So the Democrats are already very, very upset at the CBO scoring. I mean, they were going to be upset no matter what. And I think a lot of people saw this coming with some of the CBO things, which is why the Republicans wanted to pass it in the House before the CBO came out with this. Now, a lot of people are against the CBO, basically saying that, the CBO can't be trusted as much. We do kind of treat the CBO as like the oracle. The oracles, the wise oracles on top of the mountain, where we go to them and we say, "Oh, honorable CBO, what do you project that the numbers will be in healthcare?" Even though they were totally wrong on Obamacare.
Sure.
We forget that part. But what shall you project with Obamacare and healthcare numbers? and then they have like a crystal ball, or maybe a pot, like in Shakespeare, where they stir the soup, and then it shows an image, and the CBO comes out, and they see that the numbers of healthcare in the future. Here is my thing when it comes to healthcare. I talked about Trump's budget, and I talked yesterday, and I talked about how we're not really serious about solving our debt problem. We're not really serious. This country is not really serious. They say they are in some cases. The politicians say they are when they're trying to get elected. But they're not really serious about solving this budget problem.
And you know why?
Well, because they won't,
the average person,
they can buy votes.
The average, that of course. But I mean, the average person can't get a grasp on what it's all about because it's such a humongous amount of money.
Well, and then, we talked about all those programs yesterday that most people don't even know exist. They're spending all of this money
that too,
on.
Yeah.
But, that's definitely part of the problem. Well, I think healthcare is the same way. I have determined that healthcare is the same way. We are not serious about really solving the healthcare problem in this country with healthcare costs and in premium costs and the problems in hospitals and insurance and everything else in this country. Because there are ways to really solve the problem. Because this has been this started way before Obamacare. And there are a lot of problems in how healthcare is just done. And most of it, the root of it, is the cost of care is too high. Forget insurance. Forget premiums. Forget pre-existing conditions. The cost of medicine and the cost of medical procedures alone are too high. And this goes back to this one thing, is people do not have a relationship with what they're spending. So people just expect the insurance company to pay for it. And most people, a lot of times, the doctors don't even know what it costs. And the patient doesn't even know what it costs. So the insurance company covers it. And it just screws up the marketplace when it comes to healthcare. We are never going to really fix the problem until we get to that. Until we stop thinking that insurance is the end-all, be-all of healthcare in this country. It's not. It will take some innovation into radically thinking differently how we get healthcare in this country. But the problem is the Democrats, they want a radically different thinking, but their radically different thinking is socialized medicine. That's what they want. They want us to go in that direction. They will not be happy until we're in that direction. The Republicans don't have a spine. So they want to maybe save some of the free market stuff, but not really, because they're afraid of the headlines like I just read, where 23 million fewer people will have insurance. Now, there are reasons for that. One of the reasons being they get rid of the mandate. You get rid of the mandate, some people are just not going to want to buy insurance. But, you talk about the pre-existing condition thing. How do we solve the pre-existing condition thing? Because the problem with pre-existing conditions, as everybody knows, well, not everybody, but a lot of people know, is that in an individual market, you can't guarantee they cover pre-existing conditions because people will wait until they're sick to buy the insurance. You don't buy fire insurance after your house caught on fire. You don't buy car insurance after your car got in a wreck. You don't buy life insurance after you die. So you can't buy health insurance after you get sick. Okay? So how do you solve the problem? Well, one of the solutions was in Rand Paul's bill. What his solution was being able to have people create associations outside of their employer, because covering pre-existing conditions, that happens in employer-based coverage. Why? Because there's so many people in the pool that they're able to absorb the cost. But it doesn't work that way in the individual market. So one solution you can have is have people be able to create associations outside of their employer so they're not dependent on an employer for insurance, but they can still get insurance as a group. There's one plan called MediShare that kind of is that model. And a lot of people are successful. You like that plan. So that's one solution that's not a part of this bill. The other solution, expanding health savings accounts, that is somewhat a part of this bill. But the way they get around the pre-existing condition they tried to is they want to make high-risk pools in a lot of these states to cover people with pre-existing conditions. What's the problem with that? The problem with that, everyone in the pool is high risk. So they all have pre-existing conditions. So, of course, the costs are going to go up. And you need people in the pool who are not high risk in order for that to work.
And they'll have high deductibles.
Exactly right. Now, the other thing was competing across state lines. That was not in here. Now, they allow states to have waivers to get rid of the essential health benefits, which, a lot of the Democrats cry, oh, we need the essential health benefits, otherwise people won't get care. But they don't understand that some people just want a worst-case scenario insurance if they get in like a car accident or they get cancer or something. They don't want insurance to cover our doctor's visits or every prescription they buy or every, medicine they buy or every procedure they get. And if more people actually took that approach to insurance where it didn't cover all that stuff, and maybe more doctors out there were able to ignore the insurance companies and just offer patients care based on their prices they set themselves, which a lot of times they can't do. There are laws against doing that. Maybe we could lower the cost of healthcare. But like I said, we're not really serious about it. We know that stuff like that could work, but we're not serious about it. Why are we not serious about it? Well, because we have bought into the premise that it is the government's job to guarantee our health care. And that it's the insurance company's job, backed by the government, to guarantee it pay for all of our health care. Everything. Including like the chiropractor, for instance, or something. And once you have that mindset in the American people that you shouldn't have to pay for any of your health care, even like regular prescription drugs, then it's hard to solve this problem. And it goes back to everything else. It's just another entitlement that we've created through Obamacare and other things, where we believe it's the government's job to guarantee us stuff. And it always just grows. Once you get to healthcare won't be enough. It will be something else. You know, we talked about with Trump's budget, how food stamps have gone up. We think it's the government's job now to guarantee all the food we eat. And we know what people use food stamps for. They're using it for more than just their basic food. And the Democrats think it's a success that more people are on food stamps. That's good for the country. That's a problem of a mindset in this country when we believe the government's job to provide all this stuff for us.
A few weeks ago, I saw a headline in one of the papers, I forget which one, about the cost, how much it costs to deport a person. It was like $11,000. But what the article didn't point out is what the cost is if they didn't deport somebody.
Well, yeah, and that's you're talking about the legal immigration.
Sure,
angle.
yeah, but I mean the fact is they don't look at the real cost of things.
Yeah,
is my point.
Oh, of course they don't. Who actually, when it comes to healthcare, who actually looks at the cost of their healthcare? Do you, Tom Mensa, look at the cost of everything you spend your healthcare on outside of the insurance company?
No.
No, most people don't. So they have no idea. We have no relationship to our care that we're buying. Until we get that back, there's no way we can solve this problem. And even if the government takes over all of healthcare and we have guaranteed healthcare by the government, it still costs money. It still costs. The government's got to pay the cost. And when the government has to pay the cost, what are they going to do? Or they're going to ration care. It's the only thing that happens in the VA. It's the only solution is rationing care. So then you're going to have a government healthcare system where they ration care, and then all of a sudden people aren't going to be happy then. They think it's a utopia or something when the government guarantees care, and yet that's not what happens. And then you go to like places like Britain where they have government healthcare, and most people who can afford it have to buy supplemental insurance. So they have government healthcare that's paid through their taxes, and then they have to buy insurance on top of that. Happens with Medicare right now. You think government healthcare is going to be the solution? It's no. It's going to create more of a problem. I want to get more into this. There was an interview with Senator Ben Sasse just a few hours ago. He was on Special Report with Brett Baier, and he went over some of this. And even he really doesn't go far enough for what he's saying, but he talks about some of the problems in this whole mess. And, you know, with the CBO score and everything. And then I'm going to play a voice of reason, one of the voices of reason of the day on this. And we have a lot more to get to. By the way, we'll end the show with something that made Yaffee laughy, the best part of the show to many people. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. Oh, by the way, if you want to contribute, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
So I'm listening to this audiobook. I'm currently in the middle of an audiobook right now. That is fantastic. It is so good. And it's by none other than Senator Ben Sasse. Now, he's actually really impressive, really big conservative. He's a former historian. I guess you stay a historian, you don't become a former historian, you stay one. But a really smart guy. And his book is called The Vanishing American Adult, Our Coming of Age Crisis and How to Rebuild a Culture of Self-Reliance. And it talks a lot about, millennials, and I'm a millennial, but a lot of this is really more focused on the younger millennials, the 19, 20, the people in college right now, and the problems they're facing because they can't handle the real world, basically. They can't handle
the snowflakes
coming in society. Well, it's not so much snowflakes. There is that too, but it's just a great book. In fact, I'm only in like chapter 5, I think, on it. But it's probably one of the more important books I've read in a while. And I'm actually listening to the audiobook version where he's reading it. It's such an important book, and it's so good. And I'm probably I guess I need to talk about it more on a future show. But the reason I bring that up is because, by the way, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We have Tom Benson producing as well. You can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. But the main reason I'm bringing that up is because Ben Sasse, we're talking about healthcare. When the CBO has a new report out on healthcare that says while the new Republican healthcare bill, which is not even going to pass the Senate, it's going to be completely changed. It says it would result in 23 million fewer people with insurance over a decade, but it will overall decrease premiums and it will lower the deficit. A lot of that depends on if the states take the waivers, and there's a whole bunch of other factors involved in that. And the CBO, like I said, they're not the end-all, be-all of everything. They're not gods on Mount Olympus telling us what the future is going to hold or something. But he was on special report earlier, and I just happened to catch this right before the show today. And he was asked a lot about what's going on with the Senate and healthcare and his take on healthcare. And I really liked what he had to say. He addresses some things that I was kind of addressing at the beginning of this hour, that we're not really serious in this country about really solving this problem, it seems like. And we're not really serious about what the problem is. And the Democrats are certainly not serious about solving this problem. But he makes some good points here that need to be addressed. So I wanted to play some cuts of him from earlier. Go ahead and play cut one for me, Tom Benson, of Senator Ben Sasse.
Yeah, so the House bill was not going to be the bill we were going to vote on in the Senate either way. So the House passed something that sort of created a reset moment for the Senate to tackle, repeal and replace. And what I want to see is a healthcare system where American families can buy the policy they want that goes with them across job and geographic change. And frankly, this city hasn't been serious about dealing with the healthcare reform that we're going to need 5 and 10 years from now in quite some time. So that's what I'd like to see us do in the Senate.
So, as you know, I couldn't agree more. Washington's not serious about dealing with the healthcare. He's talking about how jobs are going to be a lot more volatile in the future, and people are going to change jobs a lot more, and they're going to need a healthcare that can be able to follow them from job to job. Now, he doesn't mention this here, but this, once again, a lot of people think the individual market would be the solution. Yeah, that could be one solution for a lot of people. But another solution is what I talked about earlier. Rand Paul's take, and part of his plan, was for people to be able to have associations outside of their employer. So they could have these associations outside of their employer. So if they're moving from job to job, they could still be a part of this association. The AARP could have an association with all their members or something. There could be tons of groups. You have MediShare that's out there that's similar to that. And if we allow that and we add that part of the law, that could be a big solution, especially for people with pre-existing conditions that are going from job to job. They wouldn't lose their health care coverage. And yet that's not a part of this plan. And that's why I think it really needs to be a part of this plan. He continues on here, Senator Ben Sasse. Play cut two for me.
I mean, the reality is Obamacare exacerbated more problems than it mitigated, but it's not sufficient for Republicans to just say what's wrong with Obamacare. We need to admit that there were structural problems in American health care well before Obamacare. And the biggest driver of uninsurance in America is actually job change. It's not socioeconomic status. It's not health status. It's job change. And that's going to happen more and more rapidly. We need to create a health care system where families can take a policy with them across job and geographic change.
Okay, so that kind of goes with what he said in the first cut, but that's a very interesting fact. That's actually a fact I don't hear much. You think the biggest problem with healthcare is, pre-existing conditions or something, or you think it's too many poor or whatever. And he's saying, no, it's actually job change because people are changing jobs more often. So they lose their healthcare coverage and then they can't get back on another healthcare coverage. And so once again, one of the solutions is for people to be able to have associations, be a part of that. And that's something that's really not, they're trying to address it through the individual market. And there are some good things in the individual market. I used to, before I got it through my employer, when I first had to buy health insurance on my own, I went through the individual market. And it was a high deductible plan, but I was a young guy. It did have a copay, but it was a good plan. It was through Blue Cross and Blue Shield. As soon as Obamacare passed, the bill went up. Then eventually I got it through my employer. I don't even want to know what it would have cost today. I'm sure it's a lot more. I think it was $160 a month when I got it. That was fine. And it was coverage I needed. It didn't have all the 10 essential benefits, but it had what I needed, and I could afford it. But with Obamacare, all those costs skyrocketed. I probably wouldn't have been able to afford it without massive subsidies. And I certainly don't want to go on Medicaid. So luckily I was able to get it through my employer, but that just shows how Obamacare just screwed all this up. Okay, Ben Sass continues here. Go ahead and cut 3, Tom Benson.
Most of the debates inside the Senate are about how to tweak it and change it. What we really should be having is a debate, and the Democrats should have to come to the table, since they promised a bunch of things on Obamacare that didn't come true. Average family was going to have premiums reduced $2,500. They went up $3,000 a family. We really need a debate about creating a portable health care system. So this has been broken well before the Obamacare fiasco, and now the limited 4 or 5 months that Republicans have had the different branches of government.
Okay. So, and it's kind of some of the same basic points that he talked about in the other 2 cuts. Here's the thing that he really doesn't address that needs to be addressed, though. He's still focusing on insurance. The best way to have a real portable healthcare system is being able to buy healthcare outside of insurance, making healthcare affordable again so we don't need insurance to buy all our healthcare needs. That would be the best portable system. Yet, that's not what's happening. Yet the government has just gotten more and more involved, and the insurance companies have just gotten more and more involved, and it's just made healthcare costs go up. And if the government gets even more involved, it's going to create the problem. It's going to make the problem even worse. And I've given this example before, but I'll give it again. The only time I noticed how this could change, here I have a health savings account plan, where you have a high deductible, but they contribute to your health savings account every month or every year, and then I contribute to it every month. But because of that, I have to pay attention more to my costs. So I had prescriptions I had to pay for, and I could use the health savings account to pay for it. But I noticed that I was getting a prescription somewhere, and it was too much, and I could get it cheaper, say, at Walmart. So because of that, I made a decision in the free market through competition to go to a different place to get a prescription cheaper. Imagine if we took that approach beyond prescriptions. Imagine if we took that approach to MRI scans, CAT scans, blood work. It would be our doctor, our primary doctor. Imagine how that could drive down cost, make healthcare more efficient, and work just like other parts in the free market. But that's not what we're doing. We're doing the opposite. And that's why I'm saying when he talks about we're not really addressing the real problem, that's a big reason why we are not addressing the real problem. And he's really not addressing it there. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. I'm going to play the voice of reason of the day, and we have a lot more to get to. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Orlando Smart Talk Radio. We've been talking about the health care. The CBO has scored the Republican health care bill in the House. It says, 23 million people will not have insurance because of it. It said it will be some premium increases for pre-existing conditions, but overall premiums will go down after 2 years and so forth. We talked about the reaction. We talked about why no one is really willing to solve the problem of healthcare in this country. By the way, if you want to find out more of my thoughts throughout the day on stuff like this, you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. It's Beyond Reason, the letter R. If you have any comments, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. We're on until 10 p.m. here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. But, of course, the podcast is available anywhere podcasts are available. So I thought I would play the voice of reason of the day on healthcare. And, of course, once again, he seems to be a voice of reason a lot on stuff lately. But once again, it's Charles Krauthammer from Fox News. And columnist, of course. And he was talking about healthcare, and I just happened to catch it on the fly, and he's right on this, I think. And he says here what I've been saying a lot But he puts it in a way that I think makes a lot of sense. So here's the voice of reason of the day in this hour, Charles Krauthammer, on this.
Look, I'm unimpressed by the CBO and the sanctity of CBO numbers, apart from the fact that they got it wrong by a lot last time. Of course, you're going to get an increase in the number of uninsured when you abolish the provision that requires people, especially young people who are compelled to buy health insurance, that abolishes the compulsion to buy health insurance that's completely uneconomical and unnecessary. So if you abolish that compulsion, you're going to get fewer people who purchase health insurance. That isn't a calamity. That's a rational economic decision. And second, the major expansion of the coverage was from the lifting of the Medicare, of the Medicaid cap. Medicaid was intended to cover the poor. The Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, raised that to 400% of the poverty level. Why is that a sacred number? If you reduce it to 200%, you're not even talking about the poor here. This is into the middle class. There's a huge expansion of entitlements in a country that thinks of itself as serious, says that everybody says we have to have entitlement reform, and the minute you do something that actually acts on that, you get screeches of horror like from Chuck Schumer and accusations of cruelty.
Yep, and when we talked about that yesterday as well, Trump's budget, all these accusations of cruelty, it's happening with this health care bill as well, cruelty against the American people. He makes so many good points in that segment on so many different fronts. And as I'm listening to it, I'm just thinking about it. One thing he talks about is the fact that, we say we want to be serious about entitlement reform because we know it's economically unsustainable. We know we can't afford it. So we know it has to be addressed, but every time we try to address it, there are screams of, we're all going to die, right? Go ahead, Tom Benson.
I was just going to say, how many people are on food stamps?
I'd have to look it up, but it's increased a lot.
Isn't it like 45 million?
It doubled. It almost practically doubled under the Obama years. Now, part of that was the economic crash, but a lot of people are still on it that maybe don't need to be on it.
Unemployment is now at 4.5%. How come the figures haven't come down?
And that brings up the other point that Krauthammer made, and that was talking about Medicaid. He talked about how they increased the ability of Medicaid by 400% in terms of what you make to get on Medicaid. And see, he goes, we're not even talking, he says, you decrease it to 200%. And he says, we're still not even talking about the real poor in this country and the health care they need. And my first thought immediately when he said that was the Democrats, this isn't about the poor to Democrats. They want more of the middle class to be dependent on the government for health care. They want more of the middle class on Medicaid because they believe Medicaid is the savior of health care in this country. So they say, when Republicans say, maybe we shouldn't want all these people on Medicaid. Maybe we should give them some incentive to get off of Medicaid and get on a private plan. The Democrats don't want that. That's cruel. That's evil. Government is the savior for them in health care. So if they get kicked off of the savior of health care, that's inhumane. When Krauthammer makes a good point, only the real poor should be on Medicaid, and those who aren't a part of the real poverty line, the real poor, should get private insurance, but we made it too expensive for them to get private insurance. It's just an amazing point there. Another really great point that he brings up is terms of the economic viability. Well, first he brings up the point of the CBO. The CBO, like I said earlier, we all act like, especially in government, they act like the CBO is the oracle from the secret hills in some far-off land that we have to travel and go and we talk to the masterful oracles who are looking into the crystal ball and seeing the future, and they've been wrong before. And a lot of this is based on so many different factors that it's hard to even score this. But the other point he makes is it's not unreasonable for people, young people, to not want to spend all this money on health care for this. It's just he makes a lot of good points there. Now I want to move on to a different subject here. And that is the Republicans and what they're going to do on. Well, first, let's take a call here. Let's go ahead and go to Joe in Orlando. Joe, what's up?
Hey, Yaffee. Yeah, I'm glad the other gentleman brought up food stamps because it's totally related to health care. Imagine if you could only buy vegetables and fruit with food stamps.
Yeah,
So that would take out so much of the health problems of the poor.
That's an interesting angle I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be paying for what people need.
Right.
Do you really need more than fruit and vegetables? Everything else is just a want.
Well, and, that's kind of the point is all these government programs are so beyond what we actually need. It's, they want people dependent on the government programs. They think it's good.
Actually, I went on a website just to check once because I have 4 kids, and I could qualify for $900 a month in food stamps.
Really?
Now,
I probably could qualify too.
Yeah, but I never needed it. Like when we did our budget, we never really needed it, so we never went on it. Now that's I could actually have a Cadillac instead of, a Chevy. That's unbelievable.
And that happens.
Well, yeah, you think?
And then thank you for your call, Joe. It makes a good point. And you see, that's the problem with all of these programs is that's exactly what happens. Imagine, because, okay, I'll never forget when the economic crash happened. And so they kept extending unemployment benefits you could receive. They went from a year to 196 weeks or something like that. And I remember talking to a friend of mine. I was in college at the time. And he goes, he was unemployed. And I said, well, why don't you go out and find a job or something? And he said, well, I could find a job, but I would make less getting a part-time job somewhere than I would on unemployment. So why would I go try to find a job? And really what he should have done is found 2 part-time jobs or something, really worked hard to really try to get ahead and make himself economically viable, but he had no real incentive to do that. Why? Because he was making it more on unemployment. And this is what he told me personally. And then I give the story that I always give about how I was in income-restricted housing. Talked about it on the last show. And how as if I made too much money, then my rent would go up $200, and that totally kills the incentive to make more money. That's why the tax code's all screwed up too, because, you make over a certain amount, they take more of your money. It kills the incentive to make more money. And the same thing is with food stamps. What incentive does a person have to get off food stamps when they can qualify for it and then use that money to buy all this other stuff? And then they can use food stamps to buy well beyond what they need in terms of junk food and all that stuff. And then we look at that, and then we look at what the Democrats say, and the Democrats hold that as look how great our country is because all these people can get all this stuff free from the government. And then we wonder why we have the problem of the vanishing adult, for instance, that I was talking about early in the show in Ben Sass's book. Or we have the problem of so many people out of the labor force. Or we have the problem of in the inner cities where families are breaking down. It's a cultural thing. A lot of these economic and government policies can have a negative effect on the culture as well. And then you have to look at the history, and we know that free market capitalism, individual incentive, is really what drives a prosperous society and a great society, what we have. And we're killing it every chance we can get. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. I was going to go over a little bit of Trump's approval ratings. It's very interesting. The polls are all over the place. Rasmussen has him up to 48% approval. But Fox News, they have a poll out that has him down. Poll finds only 40% approve of him. Down from 45%. So it's all over the place. Some of these polls are just crazy. I might do this more in tomorrow's show because we're kind of out of time, but I was going to talk about Ben Shapiro had an article in the National Review saying that we should be really worried because the Democrats are really firing up the base with all their anti-Trump stuff. And I was just going to make the point that in the election, and the primaries and the election, I underestimated Trump. I underestimated his appeal. I didn't think he could win. I didn't like him as much because he wasn't, real conservative on some issues. I'm not going to make the mistake anymore. So I make an effort to talk to regular people who voted for Trump. They're not too connected to politics, but they're voted to what's going on. And I think people still, their anti-Trumpism clouds their judgment a little bit on a lot of this stuff. I think they still underestimate Trump and his appeal. When you see him talk about supporting police or supporting the vets or supporting the military or talking tough on terror or just, having the budget that's taxpayer first, for instance, or tough on immigration or America first, whether you agree with some of those policies or not, it's very appealing to a lot of people in middle America. Most people who don't like Trump didn't vote for him anyway and wouldn't vote for Republicans anyway. But to act like, I understand, Ben Shapiro makes the point that in the past, being anti-president has helped change. It happened in 2006 when the Democrats took the House under President Bush. It happened under Obama when the Republicans took the House because they were all anti-Obama. So he thinks it's a very good possibility it could happen again under Trump. And I think he's right. It could, and I think the Democrats could take some seats. They have a long way to go to retake the House and the Senate. But that being said, I think Trump's a different animal. I think there's an appeal to him that is so that we continue to underestimate. And that I try myself not to underestimate. And so we'll see what happens. 407-916-5400. We're going to talk about things that made Yaffee laughy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. It's been a jam-packed show. We've been on since 8 p.m. If you missed any of the show, you can catch the podcast of the show. Just download the iHeart Radio app and search Beyond Reason Radio, and it will be up there as well. So it is that time of the show once again. Yes, it is something that made Yaffee laughy. And it actually goes back to Katy Perry. So Katy Perry, the singer, used to be a Christian singer, by the way. That went out the window a long time ago. But she's still very good looking. I'm not going to lie. She's still good looking, even though in this picture she cut her hair really short like a guy.
She looks like Miley Cyrus did 2
years ago.
She's
gone kind of, weird. Big supporter of Hillary Clinton now and everything. But she made some comments in response to this terror attack. And her comments are not what's funny, just so you know. I mean, it's kind of funny because they're just stupid, I guess. But this is what she said in response to the Manchester terror attack at the concert.
Hold on.
Uh-oh. Technical difficulties here. We had trouble. Trouble we had finding this audio, by the way. The video was taken down everywhere. But I was able to find it, but here it is.
Think that the greatest thing we can do is just unite and love on each other, and no barriers, no borders. We all need to just coexist.
Yes, that is her brilliant solution to the problem of terrorism. As somebody else pointed out today, it's hard to coexist with people who want to kill you because you exist. Yeah, exactly right. So I found this article from the BabylonBee.com. If you know anything about the Babylon Bee, you will know where this is going.
This sort of like the Onion?
Little tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, okay.
No, this is very, very serious, Tom Benson. According to the headline here, because, Katy Perry had such a brilliant take on all this. Their headline says, Babylon Bee, ISIS lays down arms after Katy Perry's impassioned plea to just coexist.
All right.
Yeah, look at that, Katy Perry solving the world.
Our secret weapon.
Yeah. From Syria, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State, released a statement Wednesday confirming that ISIS would be immediately surrendering its fight to establish a powerful caliphate after viewing an interview in which pop singer Katy Perry said, "The greatest thing we can do to just unite and love each other and no barriers, no borders, we all just need to coexist."
Oh, that's beautiful.
The powerful statement, which single-handedly dismantled ISIS, came shortly after a terrorist attack on civilians in Manchester, killing 22 people, and led the reclusive head of ISIS to hold an emergency press conference declaring the group's jihad finished. I think you can understand what kind of publication the Babylon Bee is. They have some really funny stuff out there. Yeah, and they're like the Onion, like Tom Vincent said it. Here's their quote from al-Baghdadi. "Despite my previous belief that we must slay the infidel in the name of Allah until Islam rules the world, I just can't deny that Katie's words have touched my heart." Al-Baghdadi said as he symbolically held up and then tossed an AK-47 onto the ground. He says, "It's time for the Mujahideen to start uniting and loving on people." Yeah. Oh, look at Katy Perry. Yeah. Just solving the problems of the world.
Bless her.
Says, "I just can't believe we didn't see it before. It's all clear now." This is so funny. It's really not funny because it's sad because Katy Perry, a lot of people actually take her seriously. After the video started to go viral in ISIS cave networks and strongholds, thousands of terrorists began pouring out into the streets of Mayadin, giving one another spontaneous group hugs, destroying their weapons, and planting trees and flowers in an attempt to begin rebuilding the Middle East into a utopian wonderland.
You know, the Katy Perry comments were on YouTube, but it was pulled down.
Yeah, I know. I can't find them anywhere.
Does somebody realize how stupid that statement was?
I don't know. They're saying now that what she really meant was that different, fans of her music and Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande, that's what she meant by no borders, that the fans of all their different music would coexist. I don't think that's what she really meant. You don't say no borders when you're talking about different fans of music.
Right.
Plus, that's just dumb, too. Who cares about that? In response to a terrorist attack, you're talking about fans of music. We all need to come together and give me a break. According to the Babylon Bee here, according to reports, al-Baghdadi further confirmed that a recent advertisement in which Kendall Jenner offered a group of riot police a Pepsi was also influential in his decision to immediately cease their murderous reign of terror and lead ISIS down a path of peace. Oh, look at that, Katy Perry. Obviously, I hope you can understand this is satire. If you don't, I feel sorry for you. I appreciate you listening to the show. It's been a jam-packed show. If you missed any of the show, check the podcast. Anywhere podcasts are available, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R or send me a friend request on Facebook. We will be back tomorrow night, 7 to 9 p.m. for more of Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Don't miss it. I'll catch you guys next time.
Well,